Hi, my name is Laura Miraz. I have the privilege of serving on the Board of Trustees of the Berkeley School of Theology, and I work with the American Baptist Home Mission Societies. First, I do want to say a word of thanks and appreciation to the school for hosting this wonderful event, enlightening, exciting, just a great opportunity to address the issues facing us with Christian nationalism. I think if I were to summarize one action item, one takeaway, is the importance of continuing to raise awareness in my local community, in my church, as well as in the organization and the places that I'm at, to continue to just raise awareness on what it is and how it is dangerous for us as a nation, as well as for the church. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Do you
Hi there, I am LaDonna Harris. I'm the senior pastor of the Church by the Side of the Road here in Berkeley. I am an alum and a current DMin student here at Berkeley School of Theology. So my takeaway is, as we are talking about this issue of Christian nationalism and how very dangerous it is for our society, it is really important that we think about the fact that the brown Palestinian Jew is the name from which the Christian nationalists take their origin. And yet their teaching is so antithetical to everything that he was about. And so it is important for these convenings that we educate ourselves, we educate one another, and then not just educate ourselves, but also think about what are the things that we can do together to not only combat Christian nationalism, but to also enlighten our communities inside and outside the church. This is a dangerous phenomenon, and yet I remain very hopeful because as we look around the room and see the different communities that are represented, we know for a fact that we can prevail, and we must, for our democracy to survive.
Hi, I'm Eric Sias. I am the assistant professor of biblical studies here at Berkeley School of Theology, and I'm also the director of the Latina and Latino programs here at the seminary. And so one takeaway I took from the convening today on Christian nationalism, at the surface, it was good to expose what this ideology actually is and bring it into some sort of a definition. As I mentioned inside, sunlight is the best disinfectant, and bringing out Christian nationalism, its foundations or the lack thereof, into the sunlight really demonstrates what it is, what it's about. And to understand how to really address something and solve something, we will first need to define it and understand what it is. But more so, one of the things in bringing things out to light is also a self-reflection, because so much of the language that you see within Christian nationalism is divisive. It is about othering. And so I sit there thinking about myself and how do I other? How do I use that language? Am I using that in this convening with people who are adherents to Christian nationalism? So am I falling into the same trap? And so really that was something that I feel is really substantive, not only talking about, the broader community about what Christian nationalism does, but what am I doing that can perpetuate such horrible divisiveness and othering? Yeah.
So I'm Allison Tanner. I'm a two-time alum of Berkeley School of Theology, as well as a BST affiliate as a PhD graduate of the GTU. I'm pastor of public witness at Lakeshore Avenue Baptist Church, and I'm also the national organizer of the Apartheid-Free Communities Initiative with American Friends Service Committee. What I really appreciated about these 2 days is the three-dimensional ways in which Christian nationalism was talked about. The history of Christian nationalism, going back to Christopher Columbus, going back to Constantine, the ways in which Christian nationalism right now is rearing its ugly head in very real, very scary manifestations, and also internationally the ways in which religious nationalism is manifest. Jewish nationalism, Islamic nationalism, Hindu nationalism, along with Christian nationalism, and that really helps us see the ways in which in this moment internationally, nationalism, the merging of religion and politics is really wreaking havoc and making a significant impact on who we can be as a global community. Also raising challenges for how we can contain it, limit it, challenge it so that we can be something different.
So I think the convening has been really helpful in stimulating my thinking around how much dualities are sort of shaping the way that we engage difference, and how we are often guilty of, I think, thinking about people or thinking about differences in ways that are more antagonistic, and how we need to be doing better at working with difference as a way of both protecting civil liberties, as a way of also engaging in a kind of relationship with people who are different, or who maybe have a different identity or different point of view, however you want to define difference, in ways that aren't alienating, but they're actually welcoming as a function of the gospel. And so I think I think my ideas, or the kind of ideas that are getting generated for me out of this convening, really are, how do we think constructively about the benefit of difference, and how do we approach it, and not fall into these kind of antagonistic, dualistic ways of seeing others or seeing disagreement. And that's a really important practice, because what we're finding is there's a lot of division, and it's not that people can't have deep beliefs, but to believe that your beliefs, or not to even have the skills to know how to say, hey, even though I believe something, how do I continue to construct, be a part of and welcoming every voice at the table. That's a cornerstone of democracy, and as kind of the we the people of democracy. And then it's a cornerstone to being a welcoming religious community. And I think that's a really important aspect of how we express our faith in a pluralistic context, is making sure that we are keeping the table open for new perspectives. And it's also helped me to think about what are some of the kind of challenges we're facing in our current era, in our current context, for doing that. So it's been actually very good.
Okay. Hi, my name is Michael Barram. I'm a professor of biblical studies at St. Mary's College, about 8 miles over the hill. And I teach a lot and research a lot around economic justice and reparations and kind of hermeneutics, how the church wrestles with its scriptures and so forth. And I want to add that in 1979, my father was a student at what was ABSW back then. I lived in that white building right there as a 12-year-old. Used to ride my bike all around the campus here. I would say one takeaway for me in this is the importance of power. That what we are wrestling with in addressing Christian nationalism today is really about, for Christians, is really about wrestling with what does power mean and what is the appropriate way in which it's used, right? All of us have some aspect of agency, of power, certainly in communities we do. But part of what's happening in Christian nationalism is that power is being wielded in a way that I think is really antithetical to what Jesus was all about, even what the prophets were about, right? We're told even that Moses was the most humble of individuals and actually wasn't entirely sure how he should lead the people. And what Jesus does is always kind of eschew power at the most awkward points. One of my favorite stories in the New Testament, right, is when Jesus actually asks his disciples, who do people say that I am? And Peter actually gets it right. And Peter says, you're the Messiah. And the response I think that Peter is expecting is, okay, now's the time that we're going to go and get those Romans out. Now's the time we're going to take power. And what Jesus actually does is fascinating. The first thing he does is tell Peter, when he correctly identifies that he's Messiah, he says, don't tell, right? And then what Jesus does is he says, I'm going to suffer and I'm going to die. And Peter really gets up in his grill and says, how can you possibly think this? This is not what I signed on for. I left my wife and my family and my house and all these things. And Jesus actually comes back and gets up in Peter's grill and says, look, you're following the wrong kind of ways. He calls them satanic ways, right? And I think that's what we're ultimately wrestling with is we all have a kind of drive to have influence and power, but part of what Christian nationalism does is it weaponizes the notion of power and helps us kind of imagine that if we have a vision of what God's about and what God wants, we can actually institute that, whether or not it actually comports with the scriptures that we claim are really from God, right, and that are testifying to this Jesus. Part of what we've got to wrestle with is the fact that Jesus is antithetical, again, to this very notion of Christians actually wielding power on their own, right? The reign of God is ultimately about suffering, about giving, about loving, and that doesn't mean that there's no power involved in those. It just means that oftentimes it comes in ways that we wouldn't expect, that don't actually translate well into just pure force, and that's something that we've all got to wrestle with.